How do you feel about your body? I heard some groans. Okay, don't raise your hand or say something out loud, but on a scale of 1 to 10, think about this. 1 being you hate your body, 10 being, I don't know, you can't look in the mirror too long lest you faint from your own irresistible attractiveness. Where are you on that spectrum? How do you feel about your body? How often do you find yourself displeased with your body? How often do you find yourself pleased? One interesting movement we've seen pick up steam in the past couple years is what's known as the body positivity movement. Maybe some of you have heard of it. The unofficial paragon or champion would probably be, in my mind, the pop star Lizzo. But the movement's origins can actually be traced back to a 1967 article by Lou Lauterbach titled, "More People Should Be Fat." It's really, though, just been the past couple years that we've seen the movement finally hit the mainstream, although there has been plenty of opposition to it. Just about a month ago, fitness guru Jillian Michaels made a remark on a TV show criticizing the celebration of Lizzo's large body, saying, quote, "It isn't going to be awesome if she gets diabetes." She then doubled down on her position a few days later, saying, quote, "There's nothing beautiful about clogged arteries." Lizzo never responded directly, but her fans certainly did, blasting Jillian Michaels for her comments as being both ignorant and hateful. Now, I'm guessing if you don't know who Lizzo or Jillian Michaels is, you don't know their controversy, perhaps you've never even heard of that phrase, body positivity movement, even in just what I've said already, you likely have some feelings about the subject. Perhaps even some strong feelings, don't you? It's a fairly controversial subject. I've been wondering, I was thinking about this last week, though, I wonder if some of the controversy has to do with the complexity of what it means to have a body. Here's what I mean. Obviously, I'm not an expert on any of this, but it seems to me that what Jillian Michaels wants to talk about when it comes to our physical bodies is our physical health. Of course, she's a nutrition fitness guru. That's her thing. When she thinks about the body, she thinks primarily in terms of its functionality. The ability of our bodies to keep us alive 70, 80 plus years. And of course, she's right. Diabetes and clogged arteries are not beautiful or awesome at all. We shouldn't celebrate bad health. But what Lizzo and the others in the body positivity movement want to talk about is something totally different. They're not thinking about our bodies as just these functional systems that may or may not be healthy. And they often rightly point out that skinny people can be far less healthy than can larger people. When they talk about celebrating their bodies, they're not talking about their bodies in terms of their physical health or functionality, but in terms of aesthetics and beauty. In other words, what Lizzo is celebrating is not what may or may not come back from a doctor's report, but what comes back when she looks in the mirror. Lizzo and others are not waging war against health per se, but against conceptions of beauty that exclude her body, something that as a skinny person, Jillian Michaels wouldn't understand. It's going to be fun this morning. We are in a series right now. You guys need to loosen up a little bit. I know I started with some controversy, but we are in a series titled Everyday Spirituality. And in this series, we're looking at the stuff of everyday life. The practices that we engage in almost every single day. And we're asking the question, well, what does this have to do with God? Right? What does this have to do with our life with God? If we were made for relationship with God, and that's not just a Sunday morning thing, because we were made to walk with Him at every moment of every day, what does it mean to walk with Him when we eat and when we work, when we shop and when we play? What does it mean to live with God in the everyday stuff of life? The first week we talked about sleeping, then dreaming. Last Sunday we talked about waking up, and this morning we're going to talk about getting ready. Getting ready. Now, there's not a lot in the Bible about getting ready, granted. There are a few examples of people bathing and getting dressed up. So a lady named Ruth in the Old Testament does this before courting a man named Boaz. But it dawned on me that when we get ready in the morning, we come face to face with an unavoidable reality that the Bible actually says quite a bit about. You know what that unavoidable reality is? Ourselves. Our bodies, right? In the morning is when we have to wash our bodies and brush parts of our bodies. Of course, it's also when we have to look at our bodies, more so in the morning than any other time during the day. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about our bodies. Now, a foundational text for understanding the Bible's perspective on human bodies comes from the first book in the Bible, second chapter. Genesis 2 says this: "In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, no herb of the field had yet sprung up, the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being." This here is a critical text for understanding the Israelite and biblical conception of the human person. There's actually a play on words here, obscured in the English but clear in the Hebrew. God makes Adam, that's the word translated here as man, by taking dust or dirt from the Adamah, translated here as earth. So Adam comes from the Adamah, man from the earth. You see that word formed there? That is a very key verb in our text. It's the word used for a potter who makes stuff out of clay. So the idea here is that God scoops up dirt. Don't think dust, think dirt. He scoops up, he forms a person, and then he breathes his life into it. We'll study this text in more detail when we do a sermon series on Genesis this summer, but what I want you to notice is that according to Genesis chapter 2, humans are animated dirt. We are mud, physical matter, enlivened by the breath of God. This is quite different from later Greek perspectives. In later Platonic and Gnostic perspectives, the physical body is this metaphysically unnecessary and quite unfortunate container or prison for the real thing that is you, and that's your immortal soul, trapped inside the container that is your body. That is not the proper biblical view. Your body is an essential aspect of you. It's not the only aspect, but it is in fact you. You'll hear people say sometimes the real you is on the inside. And I get it, that's about character. But technically it's not true, right? It's not biblically true. The real you is both outside and inside. You are, I am, animated dirt. Now, that raises all sorts of questions about what happens when we die. I don't have time to answer those questions this morning, but listen, this is the reason why true Christian hope is for a future resurrection, right? A future resurrection of our physical bodies. So you could say that Judaism and Christianity, properly understood, are very body positive. Our bodies are essential aspects of who we are. So let's think, with that foundation now, let's think slowly about how we interact with our bodies every single morning. The first thing we do is what? After we wake up? Probably get out of bed, right? We get out of bed. Now, listen, the original question that I asked you was, how do you feel about your body? Now, that question, how do you feel about your body, can mean very different things to different people. For some of you, before I made the joke about fainting in front of the mirror, for some of you, when I first asked that question, how do you feel about your body, you thought about that question in terms of your body's functionality and health, didn't you? If you have some physical disability or an illness or chronic pain, or if you're just getting older and your body is starting to fail you, you probably didn't think about the aesthetics of your body at all. You thought about your failing vision, your dull hearing, your bad knees, your chronic back pain. This is actually what's hard about mornings for many of us. It's just hard to get out of bed. Right when we wake up and we try to get out of bed, we are confronted with our own vulnerability, we're confronted with our weakness, we're confronted with our failing strength, we're confronted essentially, it could all be summed up with a single word. We're confronted with our mortality, aren't we? Something that people who get up out of bed and it's super easy probably don't even realize is an aspect of who they are. They're too young to know, right? Our bodies don't feel right. They just don't feel right. Of course, according to the Bible, there is some very good news about this. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, you heard this text read earlier, so we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure. It is very important to read this text through a Jewish lens, not a Greek lens. A Jewish lens is Paul's lens, and what he's saying here, he's not contradicting Genesis 2 and saying, oh, your body is just a container for your soul. No, what he's saying is that your broken and failing and decaying self or nature might in fact be wasting away, but God through his Spirit is generating new life in you. And then he says this 2 verses later, for we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. What Paul is saying is that one day, our bodies, which are vulnerable and weak and collapsible and decaying, that's why he uses that metaphor of an earthly tent, one day when they are destroyed, we will have new bodies that are eternal and strong and glorious. Getting out of bed can be hard for those of us whose bodies are failing. The good news here is that there's coming a day when our bodies will be whole and new. That's point number one. Second, after we get out of bed, I do one of two things next. Depending on what my wife is doing, I do the opposite. I either take a shower or I brush my teeth. How boring is it to brush your teeth day after day, right? It is so boring. Every single day, in the morning, at night, we got to do the same thing over and over and over again. Not just brushing our teeth. In the morning, there's all sorts of daily rituals that we just have to do over and over and over again. It's incredibly boring. And one of the things that we can think about or realize when we realize just the daily maintenance is that our bodies require constant attention and care, don't they? They require constant attention and care. Regarding teeth brushing, in her book, Liturgy the Ordinary, Tish Harrison Warren writes this: this morning I brushed my teeth, a mindless habit ingrained in me since before I can remember. I do so morning and night almost every day. I say almost because at times the sheer necessity of daily teeth brushing leaves me feeling resentful, and like a defiant teenager, I rebel against the system. I do not like having to do anything every day. There are days every 6 months or so where I go to bed without brushing my teeth just to prove I can, just to prove I am not a slave to my molars. Can anyone relate? She goes on to point out, however, that the reason she cares for her body day in and day out and brushes her teeth is because her physical body is so integral to her experience of the world, to the joy and the pleasure she experiences in God's world. So she concludes again about brushing her teeth. So I brush my teeth in the morning and night almost every day because I want to crunch chips and eat tacos as long as God gives me breath. We care for our bodies because they are so integral to our experience of the world and our ability to enjoy or even engage what God has given us, the physical world all around. In her book, The Quotidian Mysteries, Christian writer Kathleen Norris points out that the absence of joy, right, so let's think about this in the reverse, the absence of joy, the inability to delight in anything, the reluctance to engage the world around, what she calls extreme melancholia or depression, it expresses itself first in a reluctance to care for one's body, doesn't it? You can't go through the rituals. It's too much. It's too difficult. When we're unable to experience any joy in God's world, when we're so despondent that we cannot engage what is around us, the care of our bodies becomes impossible. The point here is very, very simple. When we care for our bodies, when we brush our teeth, when we shampoo our hair, take our daily vitamin or whatever, we do so because of joy. Or at least the promise of joy. Our physical bodies are how we experience and engage God's world, and we, of course, then must maintain them and prepare them properly for the day ahead. Third, we stare in the mirror. At some point, while I'm getting ready, I'm brushing my teeth or blow drying my hair or whatever, I do blow dry my hair every day, all right? Just want to let you know that. You don't think I just roll out of bed and it looks like this, right? There's a lot of work that goes into this, people. You need to appreciate. Anyways, okay, so at some point I look in the mirror, and you do too, and unless you gave yourself a 10, right? Unless you're the kind of person who faints at your own hotness, you likely looked in the mirror and didn't like what you saw, right? I mean, that's true of all of us. No matter where we are, how we compare to our culture's ever-changing standards, that's our experience. I mean, if it was just like by the culture's standards, plain or ugly people that didn't like what they saw, then why is it that the beautiful people spend more time in front of it, caring for themselves, fixing themselves up, going through expensive surgeries? It's an experience we all have, isn't it? When we look in the mirror, we don't like what we see. Now, no more attention is paid to physical beauty and the physical body than in the Bible, in the entire Bible, than in this book called the Song of Songs. And we actually looked at a dream report from this book a few weeks ago, but the Song of Songs is a love poem, back and forth love poem between two people, a man and a woman. Early on in the poem, the woman speaks about her physical appearance, and she says this: "I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem." So the woman here is speaking to her girlfriends, actually, at this point, and she says, "I am black and beautiful." Now, that word black probably doesn't mean what you think it means. It refers to her color and not necessarily her race. The Hebrew word used here can also mean dark or dark-skinned, and this whole poem is set in the Middle East, not sub-Saharan Africa. So most likely she's saying, I'm dark-skinned, or at least just referring strictly to color, and beautiful. Now, why would she need to say that? Why would she think that's important to tell us, to tell the other daughters of Jerusalem? Well, we actually find out in the very next verse. "Do not gaze at me because I am dark." That's the same word that she used earlier, translated black. "Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyards." In the ancient Near Eastern world, darker skinned would have been considered less beautiful simply because it means you're lower class. Spend all your days working the land under the bright light of the sun. She says she's been working in the vineyards because of some family drama. So her skin is darker as a result, making her less attractive by ancient Near Eastern standards. But what does she say here? Forget the culture standards, right? I am black and beautiful. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? She doesn't need anyone to tell her she's beautiful here in this opening chapter. She tells herself. She doesn't need the affirmation from men. She doesn't need affirmation from the culture around her. She is a 3,000-year-old paragon here of the body positivity movement, you could say. But then, just a chapter later, in Song of Songs chapter 2, she says this: "I am a rose," or flowers, probably how that should be translated, "of Sharon," or Sharon, "a lily of the valleys." So it looks like she's complimenting herself here again, right? Only one problem. If we were familiar with the landscape of the Sharon Valley, especially during springtime, we know there is nothing special about flowers or lilies. They would have been everywhere. So actually, I think she's not complimenting herself like she did earlier. She's actually perhaps expressing some despair over her appearance. Not that she's ugly, just that she's ordinary. And if you want proof of this, let me show you the very next verse. Because the man, her lover, responds to what she said, and he says this: "As a lily among brambles, so is my love among maidens." You may be a lily, but everyone else is thorns, he says, right? You are one of a kind. You're not ordinary at all, my love, he says. So see, here's what I want to point out in these two verses here in chapter 1 and chapter 2. This young woman struggles between confidence in chapter 1 and despair in chapter 2 over her body, right? She is neither some pathetic princess whose self-image requires the help of a prince, a knight in shining armor, but neither is she some early icon of modern feminism, completely confident in herself without the help of others. She's just complicated. She's a regular human being. She struggles Sometimes she likes her body, sometimes she doesn't. Later on in the Song of Songs, the man and woman take time to describe each other's physical appearance. And I'm going to show you an example from chapter 4. This is the man describing the woman's appearance. I would have shown you her describing the man's appearance, but that's like at least rated R, so I've got to give you just the PG-13 description. So this is the man describing the woman's physical body. Song of Songs, chapter 4. How beautiful you are, my love, how very beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats moving down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come up from the washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them is bereaved. By the way, that means she's not missing any teeth. Isn't that a beautiful way? Your lips are like a crimson thread. Your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in courses. On it hang 1,000 bucklers, all of them shields of warriors. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lilies. Okay, so this is kind of weird, right? Part of the problem is that we don't live in the same context. We don't live in the ancient Near Eastern or ancient Mediterranean pastoral setting described here. So we've never seen, most of us, I don't think anyways, have seen goats, flowing down the slopes of Gilead. We're not familiar with the Tower of David. We don't see many deer feeding among lilies around here. There's another problem with this text, though, and let me demonstrate it. Go ahead and just work with me and close your eyes. I know I'm asking you to do something and you don't want to. It's natural. Just close your eyes, okay? I have just read this description to you of her appearance, and I want you, with your eyes closed, I'll remind you of what he says, to try to picture what she looks like. So let me remind you now. Eyes like doves, hair like a flock of goats, teeth like shorn ewes, cheeks like halves of pomegranate, neck like a Tower of David, breasts like two fawns. Okay, open your eyes. How'd you do? Were you able to picture her beauty? No, you weren't, were you? You weren't able to picture her beauty at all. That's what's so interesting about the text. We have no idea whether she was beautiful or not by any culture standards. We don't know. Here's what's happening. It's very simple. The man is simply using the strongest, most beautiful, most enchanting, most mysterious images available to him from his pastoral context, and he's applying them to his beloved. He's taking the strongest, most beautiful, most enchanting, most mysterious images available to him from his 10th century BC Mediterranean context, and he's applying them to his beloved. Listen, here's the point. It doesn't really matter how she compares to others, because when he looks at her, all he sees is strength and beauty and mystery. All he sees is strength and beauty and mystery. Why? Why is that all he sees? Well, in the Song of Songs, I think it's fairly obvious. He has the eyes of love, right? He has the eyes of love. When you love someone, it doesn't matter what they look like in comparison to others. When you're in love with someone, it's even hard for you to figure out where they rank in society's ladder of hotness, right? You can't totally tell. When you look at somebody with the eyes of love, you love not in comparison. Your form of love is simply delighting in the person right in front of you. Delighting in what God has created. You notice its beauty. You notice its strength. You notice its mystery. When you have the eyes of love, the ever-changing cultural standards simply melt away, and you rejoice in God's creativity. All right, let's move on to the final thing that we do when we get ready. We get dressed. Hopefully, we all get dressed. When we get dressed in the morning, we are, for probably the first time, well, maybe this also happens if you put on makeup or do your hair, but when we get dressed in the morning, we are preparing for our interfacing with the public, right? When we dress, you could even say, maybe a fancy way of saying it, but our biological selves become social selves, right? Because when we dress, we think about the people we'll see, the places we'll go. We think about our social engagement, right? And this, of course, comes with complications. Not just the complications of the fact that half of what's in your closet no longer fits you. There are other complications when we're thinking about our public engagement and then choosing what to wear. In 1 Timothy 2, Paul writes about clothing, and he says this: "The women should dress themselves modestly and decently in suitable clothing, not with their hair braided or with gold, pearls, or expensive clothes." First service was just as awkward as you are. Now, don't freak out, ladies. You might not obey this passage. Neither do the guys. What do I mean? Well, this is actually the second part of a two-part admonition that Paul talks about. And the first part is directed towards the men exclusively. And he says this: "I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting up holy hands without anger or argument, also that the women," so on and so forth. Now, I looked out during our worship service. I didn't see any of you holding your hands up, you men. Did anybody hold their hands up when we were praying, when Nathan was praying? So it looks like you guys didn't obey Paul either. So women, you can wear whatever you want. There is something important going on here. Yes, just like the raising up your hands during prayer. What Paul is saying is very context sensitive and context specific. Sometimes we miss that when we're reading Paul's letters. We just think he's writing this letter first just to everybody, at all times and all places. If Paul was saying that you can never wear braids in your hair, never wear expensive clothes, never wear any jewelry, for all times and all places, we have a major problem. The Bible then contradicts itself. In Proverbs 31, for instance, a woman is praised, and that's the key word, she is praised for her clothes-making skills, and it says this: "She is not afraid for her household when it snows, for all her household are clothed in crimson. She makes herself coverings, her clothing is fine linen and purple." Now, if you understand something about the ancient world and ancient clothes making and dyes, you know that crimson, fine linen, and purple means that the clothes she makes for her household and herself are about as expensive as you can get, actually. About as flashy as you can get. This is actually high-end fashion here in the ancient world. And the key is, she's praised for it. Another example, Psalm 45, a princess is praised for her beautiful wedding clothes, her gold woven and many-colored robes. And of course, in the Bible, no clothes are more elaborate, no more expensive, no more flashy than the clothes commanded to be worn by a particular male. The high priest in the tabernacle, according to Exodus 28. So what is Paul getting at then? Well, there's another passage in the New Testament that kind of helps us understand a little bit about the context here. It's James chapter 2, and the writer says this: "My brothers and sisters, do you, with your acts of favoritism, really believe in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ? For if a person with gold rings and in fine clothes comes into your assembly, and if a poor person in dirty clothes also comes in, and if you take notice of the one wearing the fine clothes and say, 'Have a seat here, please,' while to the one who is poor you say, 'Stand there,' or 'Sit at my feet,' have you not made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts?" You see here in this passage that clothes indicate someone's social status, right? Obviously, and that's still the case even today, but it was even more so in the first century world. And the church here, according to James, is always tempted to favor those of higher status, as you see in this passage. In the first century Greco-Roman world, fancy clothes, braided hair, jewelry were not about creative self-expression. They were about status, declaring one's social ranking. The temptation for the church is to engage in this competitive, status-seeking game and then to show favoritism towards those who are winning. Here's what Paul is saying in 1 Timothy then. don't even go there. Don't even go there. Don't play that game. The modesty he's encouraging women in Ephesus, that's the context for 1 Timothy, it's Ephesus. The modesty he's encouraging, probably should even be better translated as humility, has, I know it's been used this way so many different times, but it has virtually nothing to do with a woman's sexuality or wearing too little clothing or something like that. Obviously, the Bible would assume that you ought not flaunt your sexuality through your clothing, but these texts that talk about, there's another one in 1 Peter, I believe, about dressing modestly are about status and social ranking games being played specifically by first century Ephesian Christian women. And in the church, of course, there's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither slave nor free. All are one in Christ Jesus. So Paul says, don't even go there. As you look at the Bible's witness on clothing and getting dressed, I think we could kind of say this. When it comes to clothes, like self-expression is perfectly fine. We express ourselves in all sorts of ways, right? How we talk, how we walk. Like wearing clothes that express yourself is totally fine. It can often, for that reason, be debilitating, right? Because we're always concerned if we're maybe unique enough or what the latest trends are, but self-expression is fine. Creativity, I think, would be fine. I mean, God is a creative God. We image and reflect Him when we are creative in our clothing. Beauty is absolutely fine. That's from Him. Wearing clothes that appropriately fit the context that you're engaging, that's fine. That's what actually Paul means by suitable. The word suitable in 1 Timothy 2, status-seeking competitiveness, don't even go there. All right. We get dressed. Let's bring this all together now and try to reflect. And I'm struck by the strangeness of this phrase. I am every week. But I want us to reflect on what it might mean to get ready with God. It strikes us as strange because I think we live and breathe in even a Christian culture, and we should only make sense to be with God in spaces like this, right? During Bible study, during quiet time. Or maybe if you're out witnessing or something like that. That's the oddness of that phrase. It's because we, at the end of the day, just believe that this is how we live with God, not in every moment of every day. What might it mean, then, to get ready with God as an act of our life with Him, as an act of our spirituality? Now, there's so much that we could talk about, and I do encourage you over lunch to think about more ways this might impact your morning as you get ready. Here's my own suggestion, how I'm kind of thinking about it right now. Okay. So you get out of bed. For some of you, you don't even think about it. You don't even realize you hopped out of bed. Why? Because your body is fully functional, completely healthy, and pain-free. Praise God for that if you don't even notice when you get out of bed. Others of us are not so lucky, though, right? Some of us, it takes time to get out of bed. It hurts to get out of bed. It's uncomfortable to get out of bed. For those of us in that camp, get up in hope. Get up in hope that even though your earthly tent, which is vulnerable, collapsible, decaying, mortal, even though that earthly tent will one day be destroyed, God is going to give you a new one, and it never will. It is eternal and from the heavens. What that means is get up in hope that one day you will stretch your arms and your legs and you'll be able to run and jump and skip and dance like a young child. Get up in the morning in hope of what has come. Then as you go through the rituals, the daily rituals of caring for yourself and brushing your teeth, shampooing your hair, taking your daily vitamin, whatever, as you're doing all that, you are in that moment properly loving and caring for the precious gift that is your own physicality. And you can remember that you have access to something that a free-floating immaterial soul could never have access to. You know what that is? Most of what is joy in this world, right? You know what a free-floating spirit can't experience? Warm water pouring over your shoulders in the shower. The smells of lotion and perfume. That feeling on your teeth, as you drag your tongue across your teeth right after you've brushed your teeth. That ecstatic relief you feel when you've taken your morning pee. Am I wrong? Tremendous feeling. There is so much joy in God's good world. And as we are attending to our bodies in a way we really don't the rest of the day, maybe later on at night we do as well, as we're paying attention and preparing our bodies for life in this physical world, rejoice in it. Receive your physicality as a gift from God. Then as you look in the mirror, I know this is where, for some of you, things get really complicated. Why? Because we don't like what we see. I get that. I don't think I've ever looked in the mirror in my life and been like, yes, that's where it's at, Ryan. Just go with that for the rest of your life. I've never looked in a mirror and loved what I saw. And if you can relate to that at all, perhaps this might sound a little corny, but I do encourage you to ask God for something very simple. Ask him to give you the eyes of love, which, remember, is not love by comparison. The ever-changing cultural standards melt away in that moment when there's real love, right? Ask God to give you the eyes of love so that you can notice the strength and the beauty and the mystery of what stares back at you in the mirror. And if you can't see it, keep looking. Keep looking until you properly see what God, in fact, has created in you. And then finally, after all of that, you go to your closet to get dressed. And at this point, here's my suggestion. If you've done everything else, just wear whatever you want. I mean, think about this for a moment. If you've gotten up in hope, if you've cared for your body in joy, if you've looked at yourself in love, you're ready. You're ready to engage the public sphere. You don't have to play those status-seeking competitive games anymore. You don't have to endlessly agonize about how you are going to look in public. You're actually properly prepared for getting your eyes off yourself and now looking out at others. So I say, if you've done the first three, wear whatever you want. Because by that point, you are ready for the day. And you're ready now to reach out to others with the love that God would have you reach out to them with. Let's pray.